Seems fair to me.
Donnybrook is made possible by the support of the Betsy and Thomas Patterson Foundation and the members of 9PBS.
Hey, thanks for joining us for this edition of Donnybrook. Thank you very much for being with us. Little programming note. Dr. Sam Page, County Executive, St. Louis County, running for re-election, will join Alvin and me on Next Up, and that's halfway through this hour. Looking forward to that. First, let's meet the panelists before we get to the hot topics, starting with Wendy Wiese, half of the Jennifer and Wendy show on the Big 550 KTRS. Joining us for the first time, and we're happy about that, Jacob Kirn, who's sitting in for Mr. Bill McClellan. Mr. Kirn is the managing editor of the St. Louis Business Journal. Thank you, Jacob. Also with us, one of our founders. He was with us in 1987 when the show started. Ray Hartmann from rawstory.com, the Riverfront Times, and St. Louis in the Know on KTRS. And from the St. Louis American, where he writes a sports column and edits the news, Alvin Reid. We're going to start with you, Alvin. Again, St. Louis has the dubious distinction of being the least safe city in the nation. Joe Holloman of the Post-Dispatch had a pretty lengthy story on this today, taking a look at Wallet Hub, a personal finance site, which is the source of this information. But no matter how you spin it, it's not really good, because I'm sure that newspapers around the country are again saying that St. Louis is the least safe city. What do you think?
Well, first of all, Ray, he doesn't call us Mr. What's up with this?
Know.
You know,
I don't know.
What do you think, Mr. Reid?
Teacher's pet. Teacher's pet.
all right.
Good catch.
So yeah, Joe had an interesting article on this, and he had a very kind of lengthy lead in, kind of explaining, Wallet Hub, yeah, some good, some bad. You know, being an editor of a paper, and we get a lot of studies from a lot of different places, and we get all the ones from Wallet Hub, and some of them I do take with a grain of salt. Maybe this one is one too. I mean, I don't know that we visit more porn sites than other cities and states do, and I don't think it says a lot of things about a lot of cities that I wouldn't necessarily say like that's absolutely positively true. I think there are things missing from the study that would basically not maybe refute the entire thing, but cause you to think twice. St. Louis City has a murder problem, don't get me wrong. I am not trying to reduce that, but I'm not gonna like, oh my God, Wallet Hub said we're the this or that.
I think it's like this drip, 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 that water torture sense that we all get since Ferguson, since 2014, frankly. And it's like every single time, speaking of editors, newspaper editors, when they see something out of Missouri, out of St. Louis, it sets off some sort of a bell. And especially if it has any kind of a negative connotation, we do have a well-earned reputation as a violent city. Wallet Hub or not, they do use FBI crime stats as part of that distinction, so we can't dismiss it. I mean, I think there's that instant, well, I don't feel unsafe, but the people who visit here do.
Well, first of all, I thought Joe did a great job with it, and when he's on our show, he's not nearly that logical. But it's just, I guess Joe is, better when he's writing. No, but I thought he did a really nice job with it. I think the problem we've got is perception's reality. I mean, I think these things are clickbait for the most part, and they're certainly, whether they're sourced okay, they still kind of put them into a little hopper, and it's unscientific. One of the interesting things I thought is Kansas City, which we always hear such great things about, according to Joe's story, wasn't that much ahead of us. They were like 161 or something. I mean, and so, I will say, that I don't particularly care for them, but I think the story gave him some context, and I think whatever any of us thinks, they just reinforce, to your point, they reinforce this narrative.
Even if you're at 145 or whatever Kansas City was, there's always a difference between the absolute bottom and a little bit above, because the absolute bottom gets the headline.
You bet.
And the other problem is what we talked about before. it's the geography, it's the square mileage and the population of the city of St. Louis versus these other places. So you're taking the population and you're dividing it by the homicides, you're dividing it by the robberies, you're dividing it by these things, and it doesn't come out favorably, it comes out terribly. What St. Louis actually needs to grapple with, and what this kind of study shows you, is that you've got to change that boundary. Something has to change, I think.
I think you got to reduce the number of homicides. I'll give you a little. First of all, I agree. I think if it came out of the John Jay College of Criminology or UMSL or Johns Hopkins, I'd feel more. But, you know, it's obviously, next week it'll be the best places to have a first date
dinner.
by Wallet Hub. All they're trying to do is get their name on Donnybrook, and they're succeeding.
But that's their goal.
I do
number
want to
one
point out,
priority.
though, that right now in Boston, the Boston Globe has this series on how bad the homicides are in Boston. And Joan Vanocci, who's been a columnist there forever, she says, you know, just one is too many. And while St. Louis has 154 to date, Boston, with twice the population, has 28. And I think she's making a point. I feel that we have resigned ourselves to homicide.
This identity.
A little bit. They're outraged, and they have 28 homicides. And it's not front page,
We're
really.
sleepwalking.
What do you
When
mean? That's all we talk about.
No, you know what?
Look, I mean, I'm
the homicides
sorry.
are small little stories.
I don't remember anybody saying. First of all, I've never seen any city say, "Well, we got good homicides here. We like the ones we've got."
Well, the politicians say that because
No, they don't. They try to minimize it. I remember we had a story not long ago when it was going down in St. Louis, and I didn't take the bait then. I think it's an overrated statistic, but I think we all know it's a flat-out tragedy.
How about these statistics?
We all think it's a tragedy.
Jacob, by the way, and welcome. And there is a column in your newspaper this week by Donnybrook founder Mark Vittert, which is really off the charts because he describes how he lost his home. It vanished in Fort Myers, Florida. Yeah, so I know our viewers will want to read that. And our thoughts with the Vittert family, and thankfully they're okay. Let me ask you about some stats with pedestrian deaths. In our area, including all the counties, 38 so far this year. In a recent 48-hour period, 4 people lost their lives, pedestrians. In the city of St. Louis, it's about 13, two bicyclists and 11 pedestrians. What do you think should be done here?
Well, I know the mayor wants to spend $40 million, $41 million to put in, you know, permanent bike lanes, these medians, these extended sidewalks, things like that. I don't think it's nearly enough. I actually don't, because there are these massive boulevards in the city of St. Louis, Tucker, Jefferson, Market. You don't need these massive things. The population is not there. The traffic is not there to support that. I would plow way more money, and I would make yourself different from these other areas in the region, and I would, you know, make yourself the pedestrian, the walkable place that has these, you know, this infrastructure for that. Because right now, it's really shocking, and I live in the city. I will not ride my bike on these major roads. It is actually terrifying. Every single day that I'm downtown, I can tell you that I see really out of control driving, where people not only are blowing through lights, but they're spinning around in the middle of intersections. I mean, crazy stuff. It's ridiculous.
I don't do it that often. No, I'm right there on like Market too, where the office is, and I hear you. I would say that the 2 biggest reasons why that's not going to happen are the St. Louis Blues and the St. Louis Cardinals to delay someone who is come to the city to go to the hockey game or the baseball game, you know, on Market Street or Tucker or whatever, that they would just be against that. So where are we talking about actually, you know, like putting this $40 million? Is it where people already ride bikes, or are we trying to honestly create safety throughout the entire city? And it sounds, I mean, what you're saying, I get. I'm just kind of like, I just think they would all end up beautifying where people already ride their bikes safe.
I don't think you can design a city for people who don't live in it. You know what I mean? I mean, you don't design a city for the people who are coming in from these other areas. You're trying to make an attractive place.
I think it'd be nice to have a more narrow Tucker or Market, but really it's the drivers who are out of control. They have to be pulled over. They have to be given tickets. That's one thing. Another thing, I was in Salt Lake City last year, and they put orange flags at the intersections, and you grab one and you hold it up there as you cross the street so the car can see you. And now, when I was in New York, I saw this video about Kansas City, which is using money from Michael Bloomberg. It's called Art to Asphalt, and they reconstruct, or they paint intersections to slow down the traffic. I don't think you'd need $41 million to do that. I think Michael Bloomberg would give us the money.
We were at Manchester and McCausland Saturday night on our way to the Piccadilly, and they're in that whatever little island, what are they called? The little concrete portions.
Medians.
Medians, but this was like a corner of Manchester and McCausland. There was a skateboarder, and he was doing something gymnastic on the skateboard. I wondered if he was under the influence. Frankly, I wondered if he was trying to commit suicide by oncoming traffic. So they pointed that out in the article, that a lot of times the pedestrians who are just quite frequently as gone as some of the drivers are part of this, and we don't usually think of that. We immediately, because this was unbelievable.
It's funny that you mentioned. Oh, go ahead.
You are not taking away my skateboard freedom. Yeah. Can you imagine me got that?
No.
Yeah,
no.
Very funny. No,
I wouldn't blame the Blues and the Cardinals on this.
No, I think I'm talking about that squeezing down like Market Street. That's it.
Narrowing.
And the funny thing is, as rude as people on the East Coast are, the only time where East Coast people are cordial, and I was there, are at crosswalks.
That's correct.
They do not put up with that mess.
I just want to say, I think Jacob's got a good point, that we need to, whether it's the specific example of Tucker, which would run into some political difficulties, I think there has to be a sense that this was a city that was structurally built for 850,000 people.
Right, true.
And I think it's really smart thinking to say we've got to, at least in some places, now it might not be Tucker,
But isn't this
rethink
part
it.
of
I
Great
think
Rivers
that makes a lot of
Greenway?
sense.
I mean,
I'd go beyond it.
Yeah.
I think it's something they could put
Wendy
a stamp
Wiese,
on.
I want to ask you, Wendy, about a story that literally was disgusting, and that is that mice and cockroaches invaded the animal shelter in St. Louis County. And as a result, officials there, employees of the county, threw out 10 tons of documents, 20,000 pounds. And they did so because they said that they couldn't salvage the records. But this had personnel information, vaccine and rabies information, and conveniently, maybe for the county, it was also information that lawyers suing the city wanted to see for their lawsuits. Actually, they were suing the county. Lawyers wanted that information. The county threw it out. Don't you think they should have held on to those records?
With all due respect to Mark Pedroli, who was the attorney who was quoted in the article about the litigation and how this is unprecedented and all of that, I say I mean, you have to throw it away immediately. When I think of that kind of an infestation, 400 boxes, is that right?
250.
250, okay, well, that to me isn't even a question, and I'm sorry about the litigation, and I'm sorry about all of the questions that kind of end up in the landfill with it, but you can't mess around with that. That is a source of disease.
Well,
I mean,
they've been messing around with it for decades. My understanding is some of these records predated the building, which is 20 years old or something. And, you know, I think,
paying attention to
I don't know that it's certainly the new people. There's a new director at the health department. I do think you have to follow the law. I mean, what's really amazing about this story is the idea that you would, I don't have much common sense, but the idea that you would store these records forever in cardboard boxes for decades and not think that maybe
mice,
and particularly in an animal shelter of all places. And so but there's two different issues. So one is I don't think you can blame the current health department or the current administration for the infestation problem, because that's apparently been going on forever,
which makes it even worse.
But on the other hand, as far as specific records, you still have to, if they've had these
There's a
stranger
procedure.
things, creatures living in these
Charlie,
things,
if
you
you're
have
dealing
you have to follow the procedures.
No, the procedure is you have to get the permission from the county council.
have to.
And I did talk to an exterminator today who thought that it was an overreaction because the boxes, he said, should have been put into a truck and then they should have been fumigated.
That's right. I think
That's
what?
a
I think that's
professional
right.
who's been in the business his entire life.
And then the same attorneys that rifled through them would be suing the county because they had black lung or something like.
Thank
no,
you. That was my first thought.
mess
The
has
bubonic
got to
plague.
go.
That's how it started.
It's been there
Boxes
for decades.
in an
Right.
animal shelter.
By the
Look,
way,
it seemed like in the article that these supervisors had time to mull this over and to figure out what the procedure and the legality should have been. I mean, there was time to figure this out. I mean, it didn't seem like it was just a
Wasn't
hasty
just an
thing.
emergency dump. Yeah.
well, it's still that's analysis paralysis kind of thing. It's filth. It has to
Alvin,
go.
but it's been there for
These are
decades.
government
You
documents.
and the point is, I think this was the genesis of this was the APA coming in and going, hey, you boys have a problem here. And I get that. And I don't, like I say, I don't think it's necessarily an indictment of the current health department, but you still
It's an
have
indictment
to,
of somebody.
But no, it is. But it goes back, but you still have to follow the law when it comes to those
I
records.
would be so grossed out that the
You would
law
be,
would be the
but
last
yeah,
thing I was
well,
thinking
Moving
about.
onward.
Okay.
Moving on. We've had enough infestation talk. Jacob, I want to ask you, your paper has been all over downtown development, taking a look at what's going on or what's not going on. And currently, we have a developer who's walked away from what was at one point the largest office building in America before the Pentagon was built. That's the Railway Exchange, former headquarters of May department stores. That's empty right now. So is the AT&T building, 1 million square feet on Market. Jefferson Arms on 12th Street, maybe 12th is too wide. And then the Millennium Hotel. Does it seem like a lot of these projects just aren't getting off the dime?
Well, it just doesn't seem like a new story. There's iteration after iteration of these people who come in and there's some kind of plan and then it just doesn't happen. And our reporter, Gloria Lloyd, has sort of been on top of the Railway Exchange, what's been happening there. Carnegie, which was a developer out of New York, was interested in that, but they've now said that the competition from potentially redeveloping AT&T Tower would be a reason to walk away. Now, I don't think that Wendy thinks that that's exactly legitimate. One thing that we've reported about AT&T is that the new owner of that building, which is Samara Road, another developer, has discussed with people in town selling the property, which maybe indicates that they would not ultimately be the redeveloper who would make the AT&T Tower into residential units.
Wasn't it in your story? I thought it was your reporting that said that that's what these people do.
They have done it in the past.
Well, okay, that's their shtick. And it reminds, to me, this reminds me of my old theory about how St. Louis was an outpost in the 19th century for elixir salesmen. It's always out-of-town companies from New York that are coming in. You know, remember we bought the Admiral from the guy in Pittsburgh like 3 times?
John Connolly.
You know,
That's
yeah.
right.
And I mean, we always get house. So here's some company from New York that comes in and buys our, you know, historic white elephant, the AT&T, which is never going to be successful. And they get historic tax credits that they're going to get, which will come at the expense, whether they admit it or not, of truly historic buildings, which the AT&T Tower is not. And now we got these guys, I guess somehow, because of those tax credits, I guess whatever renovations are done become very inexpensive relatively. And so they're going to sell it. And it's like, where's the St. Louis money in any of these things? Why is it all New York guys coming in and doing these deals? It looks very questionable to me.
I've just always wondered, like, can you start at, you know, like a balance of 0 on these properties and put out there that, okay, all right, especially the Exchange building. It's a historic building, huge, all that. And then the TWA building is what it is. But the two, I mean, can't you just say, like, all right, look, developers nationwide, tell me what you want to do with it and tell me what you need us to do to make that happen. You can have the darn thing, but you gotta do something with it. You gotta do it in the next 5 years.
Are we still acting as though we are the prom queen?
No, that's what I'm saying.
Of
No,
the
I'm
80s.
saying
Because we're not. That ship has sailed.
I'm saying that here's a free building.
That's
Right,
right. They're all free. That isn't the issue. It's not the issue. They're all free now. I mean, the AT&T
It's what it would require to completely
The problem is
convert it
free is not free
astronomical compared to the market.
Well, you've got,
But so what I'm saying is, all right, now how do we handle that situation? Because I think is it impossible? Because if you come to the conclusion it's impossible, then tear it down.
well,
I mean that's it.
How do you tear
it.
down the AT&T building?
I would.
If you go back a little bit, macro level, the way to do it is to make it a more attractive market where people want to be, because then you don't have these developers saying, I don't think the demand is there for me to put all this money in.
But they might be right, Jacob, because every worker wants to work at home now.
Well, yeah,
no
but
one wants to go downtown to work.
that's the
not
problem with
entirely
AT&T.
true either. There are a lot of people who are already stir crazy after a couple of years at home.
I think there's a residential market that is supposedly very hot in the city. I've been told that and you look at Ballpark Village, and I've been told by folks when I was in this conversation about Cortex, about how there's a real demand here, which again is a reason not to TIF buildings in the Cortex. But the point is, if the demand's there, why are we doing TIFs to do residential buildings? But the problem with something like the AT&T building is, to your point, there's not going to be any demand in the foreseeable future for an outdated, rundown, 44-story building that has no parking in it, which is a no-no today. And I don't think anybody has a clue what to do with it.
Let me ask you,
and it's
Ray,
not historic.
switching topics because time is limited. Kanye West, I don't know how to describe him, but he's a celebrity and entertainer, singer, I guess, right? And
Billionaire. Yeah,
he's a billionaire. He's also kind of a sick puppy.
And he made some really violent anti-Semitic comments this week. Before he had made those comments, Eric Schmidt, the Attorney General who's running for U.S. Senate, had kind of said, hey, let's get together, Kanye, and work together. I don't know what he said. But then he found out that Kanye West said, DEFCON to all Jews tomorrow, something like that. And you can explain it better.
I don't think that was the sequence. I think he said DEFCON, which is, it meant DEFCON. I guess it'd be DEFCON to Jews. He made a series of anti-Semitic remarks, doubling down, saying, oh, if I'm black, I can't be anti-Semitic, and we're all black Jews, or something. I don't know what he was saying. It was clearly, I mean, I'm not one of these people.
But get to the point because time is limited.
Okay, so I believe it was after that Eric Schmidt, in keeping with the MAGA culture war, or his person on Twitter, said, what we need to do is bring,
Kid Rock.
Kid Rock, and a tour with Kid Rock and
Kanye West.
Kanye. Well, the biggest tell in the whole story is, and I think Trudy Bush Valentine called him out for condoning anti-Semitism. The biggest tell is when Eric Schmidt said, oh, I didn't do it. I didn't know anything about this. I just like his music. Sure. And I was just, if you believe, let me put it this way, if you believe that he likes Kanye West's music, then maybe you should believe anything else Eric says.
But point of order,
give me
did
a break.
Eric Schmidt condemn the anti-Semitic remarks of Kanye West?
No, of course not, because he's feeding it to MAGA talking points, which are inherently anti-Semitic. The whole culture war. Of course he didn't condemn it, because he doesn't, there's no upside. I'm not saying Eric Schmidt specifically is anti-Semitic, but there's no upside politically for him to call out anti-Semitism in the state of Missouri, and he ain't doing it.
I didn't know that MAGA was an anti-Semitic movement.
I would say the culture war, the religious war has got many tinges of anti-Semitism.
There's just many things that to discuss.
And racism and a lot of other
Kanye
isms.
West just is not one of them.
A lot of isms.
I mean, it's just.
If Trudy Bush Valentine asked her opponent to denounce the worst thing in the world, he's not going to do it.
I would tend to agree with.
Period.
Right. Well, and I'm not giving him a pass on this whole thing, because Ray is right. There's no up for him.
But
I apologize.
I don't agree with Eric Schmidt on a lot of things, and I think he's acted poorly in many ways. But I never got the impression that he was so low as to not decry anti-Semitic comments.
He didn't do it.
The problem, though, for Trudy is that there's no way to prove what Eric knew and when, and so.
Especially on Twitter.
I don't think
correct?
in
I mean,
today's
because
politics that matters. Now, Trudy is pretty far behind, probably. We'll see. But I don't.
This isn't.
It's the story. Let's just say this was a close race. This is the kind of story that would have that would, because it's in the social media world and in that whole culture war world. I think it would have an impact. But I don't know.
You have
if
a
it's
sort
enough.
of once removed situation where it's not his quote, it's somebody else's, and it's a mention of him. It's sort of too complicated to really take hold like lightning. It's just not going to work.
Okay.
But let me say something. In '76, when he was running for president, there were people in the Klan who supported Jimmy Carter. And he said, if you gave me $1, I would flush it down the toilet. And he went out of his way to condemn the Ku Klux Klan. And that's what people should do in positions of power, and those who are going to be really powerful, like Eric Schmidt probably should do.
Agreed. It's just the pace at which the news cycles and the social media virals or what have you. I'm not sure. I'm like Jacob. I don't think you can prove that he knew what Kanye meant when he said, let's go out on tour.
In the time that he made that preposterous lie about liking Kanye's music, and I just wish somebody had asked him.
Maybe he meant Kid Rock. And
Kid Rock. Yeah, I'm sure. I would just wish somebody had asked him to read off some of his favorite Kanye lyrics. He's such a big fan of Kanye. You know, it's like in the time he spent doing that, he could have done exactly what you're talking about. He could have said, I got nothing to do with these comments.
Well, maybe he will issue a statement soon, we hope. Hey, let's take a look at the mailbag and see what statements were made there. When will Donnybrook have a true St. Louis City resident on the panel? That from Michelle Constantino. Hey, there he is. Jacob Kirn with us. Ray criticized Steve Ellman when he proposed some regional solutions to the city's problems. When it came to the problems with the city jail, Ray suggested a regional solution to the problems. Regionalism, Ray? Larry Snopek of Alton, Illinois. Thank you. Talking about regionalism with Steve Ellman, not one word about Metro East. That from Dale Ferguson. You can write us, care of 9 PBS, 3655 Olive Street, St. Louis, Missouri, 63108. Don't forget those emails, Donnybrook@9pbs.org. And we love those tweets with the hashtag DonnybrookSTL. Do call the comment line at 314-512-9094 and listen to us on your favorite podcast source, Apple, Spotify, Google Play, and TuneIn. Thanks to Jacob Kirn, who made his Donnybrook debut. Hope to see you again soon, Jacob. And stay tuned, everybody, because in just a moment, Alvin and I will talk to Dr. Sam Page, who's seeking re-election in November as St. Louis County Executive. Join us, won't you?
Donnybrook is made possible by the support of the Betsy and Thomas Patterson Foundation and the members of 9 PBS.